Welcome to Inside the 605, your one-stop shop for everything South Dakota high school football. I'm David Brown. That's Jason Andera. You might remember us from another network, but we're still going to be doing the same old awesome coverage.
Isn't that it? We really found our groove last year.
We did.
On Inside
On another network.
On another network. And that other network is not doing high school sports anymore. So we said, hey, let's go to a place that cares about high school sports, 605 Sports.
Give the people what they want, and apparently you guys liked us, at least the people who are loyal viewers last season. So we're going to do it again this season, this time on 605 Sports, liveticket.tv, and we're going to be doing shows every single Wednesday throughout the high school football season. We're going to have a couple fun things. We're going to give out some weekly awards. I will have my so-called brownie points. You will have your usual game ball.
Janny's Game Ball every week. It's brought to you by Game One. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. Live ticket, TV plays of the week, a bunch of other fun stuff. We're going to have a weekly interview with Ryan Deal from 605 Sports, so we got you covered throughout the state.
And we plan to do it live. This is we're going to record this first show, but we're going to do the live shows on Wednesdays. So there's going to be some interaction with the fans at some point this season once we get everything figured out.
Absolutely. Don't interact with this one because, again, as you said, this one's taped, so we're not going to see your comments. Well, we will see your comments when we watch it back, but we won't be able to respond in real time to your comments. But this is our big preview show. It's August 21st. Week 0, Week 1, I don't know what you want to call it, but all the 9-man classes and 11B will start this week. So we'll preview the classes. And we'll start in 9B, of course. And probably the biggest news in 9B, Canastota moving down to 9B. Coleman Egan, another school, but 22 teams in 9B. Canastota probably the big one, though, that's moving down.
Yeah, Canastota has gone through some changes. First, they were co-oping obviously a couple of years ago with Freeman, and then they go on their own and move down to 9A, and this year down to 9B. Now, they don't have any Ortmans on the team.
No,
and
for the first time in forever.
That could change a few things, but they do have some good players. And in this 9B field, who really doesn't have a standout team, sorry, Avon, you're close, but they definitely could be a contender in this class when everything gets done.
Well, let's take a look at the initial 9B media poll. Avon is number 1, the defending champs with 10 first-place votes. Canastota, as we mentioned, second with 5. Faulkton, runners-up last season, in third. Corsica, Stickney, Del Rapids, St. Mary round out the top 5. Receiving votes, Kadoka area, Coleman Egan, I mentioned another new team, Sully Buttes, Hitchcock Tulare, and Harriet Selby area. But as you kind of mentioned, not necessarily a standout. The initial media poll has Avon repeating, and they got some good guys back. But with the addition of Canastota, that throws a wrinkle in things.
Yeah, exactly. I think Canastota is definitely going to be good. Their record might not reflect that. They do play a lot of those 9AA and 9A teams that they're used to playing, so the record might not be there. But come playoff time, that's definitely going to be a team to watch out for. Avon, though, let's talk about them. They are a super fast team. They started out last year with Isaiah Meyer, kind of roughed up the first 4 weeks. People really didn't know the full effect of what he could do until midway through the season when he started rambling off consecutive 200-yard games over and over, and then went to the Dome and won the Joe Robbie MVP and took home a title for Avon. Now, he's not the only guy to worry about. Landon Mutter, a very good player. His brother on the inside has been one of the most improved players at tight end, and he's about 6'7" right now. He's an absolute monster to deal with. So a lot of good players on this Avon team. The numbers are good. The speed is good. They're a team to be reckoned with.
It was a classic showdown in that championship last year between Avon and Faulkton area. Meyer had a breakout run in that game, as you mentioned, won the MVP award to conclude that 9B championship. And then when you look at Canastota, as you said, no Ortmans this season, but this is a Canastota team that was in the 9A semifinals last year, losing to eventual champion Warner. So you have to think, even without any Ortmans, the experience being in a class that's technically lower, they're a team to watch out for.
They're definitely a team to watch out for, and a lot of people are giving them votes right now, I think, on reputation. And I don't know if the record will match up how good they will be when we talk about them in late October.
Let's take a look at some of your game changers across the entire 9B class. And obviously, this is a list of a bunch of guys who you talk to a bunch of coaches who think might be breakout stars. We've mentioned a couple of them already. Meyer and Mutter from Avon. Brady Scott with Canastota was a numbers machine last year.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody who just put up tons of numbers, and I'm also looking at a team like Kadoka, who brings back a couple of really good players, including Gus Stout and their quarterback Garrett Herman. I think that's a team outside the top 5 right now that we could be talking about as a Final Four and a potential dome team when we move into November. Another team like that, Sully Buttes, they're on the move up. Wesley Whitler with a little bit more experience at quarterback as a junior this year. And Gavin Barber, to me, one of the top running backs in this class. So I think they make a little move up. And, of course, always good. Guys like Charlie Dieter of Fulton area, he's going to be a guy that lifts that team up as well. So a lot of talent in the smallest class in the state.
And then you look at Waylon Bull for Corsica Stickney. The Corsica Stickney team that really came on strong last season, they got upset by Potter County in the playoffs.
And he didn't play in that game.
Absolutely. So I think Corsica Stickney has a little bit of revenge on their minds, and they'll certainly be motivated as well.
Waylon Bull making big moves since he was a freshman, now a junior. He has dealt with injuries, but he is an absolute train to bring down. So if he's going at 100%, that's definitely a team to watch out for.
All right. The moment is now. We're going to look back on this in mid-November. Who is your 9B championship pick?
I'm going to go with Avon. Way off the
Back to
beaten
back.
path. But no, I think this team is so good. They've got that experience from last year. I love the way Coach Lucas has got this team back to their tradition, back when he was playing with Avon. And they just go out and expect to win. I think that's going to mean a lot for them this year. Give me the Pirates in a well-contested 9B this year.
Well, they would be breaking a recent precedent. There have been 6 different 9B champions in the last 6 years. Avon, going back to 2022, Hitchcock-Tulare, Del Rapids St. Mary, Wolsey-Wessington, Coleman-Egan, and Cologne.
That's interesting, and that's good news for teams like Sully Buttes, for Kadoka,
Faulkton.
for Faulkton, teams that could just, can almost taste being there. I mean, there's not a huge gap between Avon and the rest of the field.
The last 9B team that went back-to-back, Kimball in 2003 and 2004. So Avon attempting to repeat.
That's
in
why we
9B
have Dave on the show.
for the first time in 20 years. I'm full of stats.
I love it.
You're full of the expert analysis. So that's a look at 9B. Let's move on up to Class 9A and look at that preview. And the big news there, Howard going to 9A. Howard has been kind of the nomad of 9-man football. They've been in all 3 classes over the years.
Yeah, they only spent 2 years up in 9AA. What do? They find their way to the championship over and over again. This year, they don't have that experience at quarterback that they've had, but I'll tell you what, they've got experience in that backfield, and that's something they've had for the last couple of years. And you combine that with Luke Kepsel on defense, one of the most athletic players there are on defense. There's a reason they're in at number 1.
And let's take a look at the full 9A preseason poll. Howard, number 1. Wall, number 2. Wolsey-Wessington, number 3. Warner, number 4, the first place vote. I will cop to that. I'm the guy who put them number 1. I had Howard number 2. Only reason I didn't put them at number 1 is just I didn't want to anoint them immediately in a brand new class. Howard is certainly going to be a player. I picked Warner, even though they lose some guys from last season. I still think, as the defending champs, they have enough coming back to justify that. And then Hardy Counting Bison is number 5. Alcester, Hudson, Platte, Geddes, Dubrook area, Potter County, all receiving votes. But again, similar to Canastota entering 9B, Howard entering 9A kind of throws a wrinkle into the entire landscape of that 9A class.
Yeah, they come in with a lot of clout. But there's some teams that have really vaulted their way up. Look at Wall. This is a team that we used to not even talk about in 9-man football. And since Lex Heathershaw took over, he's consistently made them into a winner. And yes, they lose players again. And yes, they bring back a lot of good players. Wolsey-Wessington, another team with Moshe Richmond on the outside and Caleb Richmond back at quarterback. Last year, they kind of hit a wall when people thought they might do a little bit more. But I've heard a lot of 9-man coaches telling me, watch out for Wolsey-Wessington again this year. But there's so many teams in this class, just like 9B, receiving votes. And that tells you how wide open this is. There are a lot of teams I feel like could make that move into that top 5 throughout the year. My favorite, Platte Geddes. I think that's a team that we're probably overlooking. Jai Bailey, one of the most outstanding quarterbacks in the state, in this class at least. He's going to make things happen at Platte Geddes. Nobody really knows about him yet. He is going to make them a contender.
Yeah, Platte Geddes losing in the semifinals of the 9A playoffs last season. I had them in my top 5 as one of those voters having Platte Geddes receive votes. But looking at the game changers throughout the overall conference, you kind of mentioned a couple of guys already, Jai Bailey specifically with Platte Geddes, Kepsel with Howard. Howard just has a boatload of returners.
Yeah.
And so that and moving to a different class kind of gives them a bit, not necessarily of a mystery factor, but a novelty factor.
Exactly. And I could have put about 5 or 6 Howard guys on this list. I grabbed a few at the top with Weston Remmers. Luke Kepsel, of course, but Tate Miller, another guy that you have to watch out for who's going to make big plays. And they always have guys coming up from that sophomore and junior class who haven't gotten playing time that are ready to go. So a lot of good players there. Preston Cavalier from your Warner team that you've ranked number one. He's the big guy on the front that really will control the middle for them. He's going to be an outstanding player. I got to talk about Alec Austin, though, of Centerville. This is a big quarterback. And if you've looked at Centerville's offense over the last couple of years, they've been able to provide 400 and 500-yard games with him at quarterback. He comes back. He's a real weapon. I don't know if Centerville's going to contend in a top 5 situation, but go watch him if you have a chance to. He's really good.
Yeah, they can put up numbers. Just the defense couldn't stop anyone. That's why Centerville was 4-5 last season, losing the first round to Canastota.
Exactly. And there's a couple teams like that in 9A that have the potential to maybe make a little run. Alcester-Hudson has a tougher schedule this year, but you see 2 of their top players on the game changers list. And then Riley Veal of Harding County Bison. He had some phenomenal stats last year, too. And I think he makes Harding County into a top 5 team, which they start the season at.
And you talked about a little bit earlier, Platte Geddes should also mention they moved down from 9AA along with Howard to this 9A class. In fact, they faced each other in the 9AA semifinals last season. Now they're both in 9A this season.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of a couple of weeks to get used to everybody in their new classes. And there's a couple teams that moved up to 11-man football. Scotland and Menno co-opt. That's another big change. So there's stuff to get used to here as we get our preseason legs underneath us.
What's maybe some of the things people are looking for in 9A from a coach's perspective? We've talked about a bunch of teams, so maybe some other storylines in 9A.
Yeah, I think in 9A, we're looking at those teams outside that top 5 originally that are going to be serious contenders. I like Platte Geddes. I like Centerville. We talked about them. Alcester-Hudson has been a top 5 team this year with a tougher schedule. Maybe that helps them as they go in. So I think we're going to see some teams not necessarily in that top 5 that are going to find their way to the end of the season. And I think another storyline for 9A is who are you guys playing throughout the year? Are you playing a lot of 9B teams, a lot of smaller teams, or are you playing some of those 9AA playoff type teams to get you ready for the playoffs? The teams that play the toughest schedules are going to be the most ready come playoff time this year in 9A. And that's another reason we really like Howard. They play a super tough schedule.
All right, Crystal Ball, who's your 9A championship pick?
Well, we just mentioned Howard. I'm going way off a limb again and going with the number 1 team. But I am going to go with the Tigers. This is a team that every single year Pat Rummel has them ready to play. They plug and play 3 or 4 different running backs. They've had a talented quarterback in Taden Hoyer the last couple of years and a new quarterback this year, so that's something we'll watch for. But so much talent, so much athleticism, and so much confidence. I don't see anybody being able to compete with them.
Yeah, remember Howard lost the 9AA championship to Parkston last season in a very tight contest after Parkston was essentially steamrolling everyone defensively.
Yeah, what did they give up, 13 points in the year or something?
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And, Howard played right with him, and a lot of those guys, Weston Remmers, Luke Kepsel, a lot of those guys back this year to try to get it done in their senior year.
All right, so Howard is the pick from Jandy in 9A, moving up to 9AA. Once again, not a lot of more moving and shaking, but looking at the preseason poll, Parkston, the defending champions, on top. Hamlin is second, Elkton, Lake Benton, Hanson, Freeman, Marion, Freeman Academy. And then once again, a lot of teams receiving votes. You got Gregory, Viborg, Hurley, Stanley County, Kimball, White Lake. Your overall assessment seeing the initial 9AA poll?
Well, a lot of people go off of what they saw last year, and I think that's why Parkston gets the number 1 vote here. I did have a chance to talk to their head coach, Matt Grave, about what they have coming back, how much confidence they have, and how different it's going to be this year with that big X on their back.
Obviously it's good anytime you can have a season where we've experienced the success that we had, but that was last year's team. And when you graduate that many players with game experience for multiple years, right. Since they got to play, they've really bought into the weight room, and you lose some of that size and physicality. We got some good kids coming back. We got some good leaders. We got a lot of different size and talent, but they just haven't been cohesive together. Just because we had so many upperclassmen, they just haven't had the chance as much. But we got some good leaders coming in. We got some good talent that can kind of be versatile, similar size, speed. We might not be as big and as fast, but I think all around our kids are excited to kind of it's new for them. They're not used to having that target on their back. But I think they're excited. They've worked hard this summer to just kind of keep improving and focus on the day-to-day process. But any team that has experienced success got to stay healthy, and the ball's got to bounce your way a little bit. And, those are the only two things you can't really fully control at times as a coach. So it makes you a little nervous when you graduate a big class and you bring in a small class. Where's your depth, where you can be able to challenge yourself in practice and be able to get better without putting your guys at risk.
And it is different being the hunted instead of the hunter.
And they're a different team. They do have some studs back. Summer at quarterback, Coulter Kramer, one of their most electric players in the backfield, but no Braden Jervik, no Will Jadozzi. They've got some younger players who need to step up if they want to really stay in that hunt for a state championship. I mean, I give them respect as the number one team, but there's so many other good teams to talk about in 9AA, including the Hamlin Chargers, who bring back a ton from last year. And, they did lose some college players as well,
Yep.
but this is a team that really has a lot of pieces back in place. Elkton Lake Benton is – most of the coaches I talk to are raving about them, and I think this is a team with 3 or 4 really good players. You're not going to be able to focus on one guy. That could be trouble. And Hanson, a young, quick team, and they've been good for several years. They're going to play a little different without Brock Tuttle. They might have to be a little more shifty, a little quicker, but that's definitely a team to watch out for. And Freeman Marion, Freeman Academy. Last year, Riley Cheddar got hurt in the middle of the year, really gave them some trouble finishing down the stretch, even though Carter Weber played excellent in his stead. I think Freeman Marion, Freeman Academy could be one of those new teams on the scene that is really causing some problems, and they got a tough one right out of the gate.
Absolutely. And then Gregory, one of the teams receiving votes, they're probably the most notable team in there that has changed classes from last season. Remember, Gregory was a state champion a couple of years ago, and now they are in 9AA.
Yep, they moved back up. Not as much pressure on them this year. Last year had to play as the defending champions. I think that might help them play a little bit looser this year. They don't have some of those stars that they have been depending on, but Gregory always has a ton of good players. And Viborg Hurley is my surprise team in 9AA. I think I could see them, going very far into the playoffs with Blake Schroedermeyer at quarterback. Of course, his cousin Chase Mason, if he plays anything like his cousin, this could be a team to be reckoned with.
That's a pretty good guy to have as your cousin.
It is pretty good.
Let's look at some more of your game changers here in 9AA. A couple of the kids you already mentioned. In particular, the trio of Hamlin guys, Stormo, Van Meeteren, and Wadsworth, as you mentioned. With Hamlin specifically, that's a lot of good pieces coming back.
Yeah, and they've got other guys who are all-state potential on this team. Zach Van Meeteren, a tall receiver who really nobody can match up with in 9AA, to be honest. And some of these other guys, Evan Stormo is going to have a breakout year for them. Jackson Wadsworth is really evolving now as a junior. I think Hamlin has more potential than everybody else. But obviously in 9-man football, you got to stay healthy. But those 3, very important. You see a couple of Elkton Lake Benton guys on this list. They're going to be very important. Riley Cheddar and Carter Weber of Freeman Marion Academy. So a lot of these players on these good teams, but there's also players that we haven't talked about. Eden Myers of Kimball White Lake had a tremendous year running the football last year. And I like Britton Heckler. They've got over 40 kids out for football in 9-man football. And Daniel Pearson has really shown that he could be an explosive type player. Maybe Britton Heckler makes a push through and is considered a ranked team before this thing's over.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the last 3 champions in 9AA, 2 of them aren't even in that anymore. Parkston won it last year, but Wall and Platte Geddes, they're in different classes now. So when you look at your crystal ball for 9AA, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not going with the number 1 team this time. I think Parkston has their hands full. I think they maybe are a top 4 team. I don't think they have quite as much firepower as they did last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. When you talk about firepower, you talk about the Hamlin Chargers. I already talked about them a little bit, but I think this is a team that really will put it together this year. We saw what they did in basketball last year, putting it together, upsetting an undefeated Sioux Falls Christian team. Some of those guys are on the football team, and they are hungry to do the same thing in that sport. Easton Neuendorf was an all-state player last year. He's not even on my returning game changer list, but he's another guy who makes an impact for Hamlin. So I'm going to take the Chargers. I could see Hanson, Elkton Lake Benton, and Parkston all fighting for that, but I think Hamlin's going to come out on top.
All right, so to recap, your preseason 9-man predictions: Avon to win Class 9B, Howard to win 9A, and then Hamlin to win 9AA?
Bulletin board material, everybody.
Absolutely. Hey,
Let's go.
We're going to find out just how right you are in a couple of months. Do we want to move on to 11B or talk to Ryan Deal?
Let's get the deal. Let's see what's going on with Ryan Deal. I had a chance to visit with him earlier this week to talk about his role with 605 Sports, and was he surprised by any of the polls and some of the positioning that came out in the preseason polls? Here's my conversation with Ryan.
The first media poll of the year came out. Always an exciting time of the year. But first of all, tell us your involvement in the media poll and exactly how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a while ago when there was multiple polls. The sports writers had one, a couple of TV stations, had their own. I think there was maybe even a radio one out there. And just several years ago, we just kind of got to talking, some media members on both sides of it, and just why don't we come up with just one, just one universal poll, so there's not, confusion about who's ranked 1, 2, and some of these polls and everything. So now there's this one universal poll between all the media types, radio, TV, and sports writers and everything. So I think it's been a good thing, having just all one poll and everything. And I manage it, I guess you could say, kind of compile the votes and send out the emails for people to send their stuff in. So it's a lot of fun to run that throughout the year and see how that shakes out and everything.
Yeah, it's been great. And you do a lot of work behind the scenes. So thank you for that, Ryan. That's awesome. But when that initial poll comes out, there's always a few surprises. What, if anything, surprised you about this initial poll? Or maybe nothing surprised you. How did it go?
I think it was pretty straightforward. A lot of times you just kind of go off of the previous year. A team wins the state championship, and then they're going to start the preseason poll, number one, and then we'll kind of see how it goes for some of those teams as it shakes out, because obviously teams graduate kids and what have you. So teams might be number one just based off of history and tradition and the previous year, results and everything. So I don't think anything really surprised me too much in that first poll. It's always fun to look back at the end of the season compared to the preseason one and be like, boy, we were way off on this team or what have you. But the preseason polls are fun. Polls in general are fun for people to look at. Probably give some teams some bulletin board material, but that's all right.
I totally agree. I think it's great just to get people talking. And yes, we did see a lot of last year's strong teams come in hot this year, and that happens every year. So good stuff. Let's talk about Friday night. We're going to kick it off. Nothing better than the first week of football. We're still warm, summer type weather out there, and just getting to know these teams a little bit. We've got some good ones coming up. What are you looking forward to most? Which matchups on Friday night?
Absolutely, and I think just first of all, the opening week of football is always fun. There's just so much anticipation and build up for these teams and these towns. The summer gets kind of long. I know it goes quick, but the summer kind of goes long for some people. So it's just fun to kick off the football season on that first Friday. I guess for me, that Parkston, defending state champs in 9AA, going to go down and face Freeman Academy, and that's a couple of ranked teams, number one against number 5. Parkston did lose some did lose some players off that team from last year, but they still returned some good skill players and everything. Freeman Academy, look out for those guys though. Last year they were kind of hit by injuries at the wrong time with their quarterback Riley Cheddar. He's back though now, and I believe anyways. And I think that's going to be a good game to start things off in 9AA. And then 11B, I guess Bridgewater Emory Ethan is hosting Woonsock at Wessington Springs Sanborn Central. That's another matchup with some highly ranked teams in 11B. And, Bridgewater Emory Ethan, Coach Jeff Van Loor just always has those guys playing well. I mean, he's as good as a coach as we've ever seen, in the state of South Dakota. His track record just speaks for itself. And the Blackhawks, they've got a good run of athletes right now. You know, the Westington Springs made the Class B boys basketball tournament last year, and a lot of those guys are obviously playing for the Blackhawks. So just some good athletes really on both sides. So that's going to be a fun one to keep an eye on. And then winter, you know, 11B, whenever you talk 11B, you got to talk to the Winter Warriors, history, tradition, all that stuff. For those guys, they're always making deep runs into the playoffs, always making trips to the Dome. You know, it's always an expectation for those guys to be at the Dome. Didn't make it last year, lost in the semis to Elk Point Jefferson, but you know, winter they return a lot, and obviously headlined by Sean Hammerbeck, who unfortunately will miss some time. It sounds like to start the season, but he's going to Nebraska to play some college football, and they play Hot Springs to start the season. That's another matchup of some top 5 teams in 11B, and that'll be interesting because Hot Springs, you know, made that run last year, won the state championship, but they lost a lot off of that team. So we don't really know, you know, what Hot Springs kind of looks like at this point. So that'll be a good measuring stick for those guys. You know, going down to winter is no easy task for anybody, but that'll be a good matchup for Hot Springs to kind of see how they size up to start the season and everything.
Some fun, important games to get things started, and you, as always, are staying busy. What's the football plan look like this year at 605 Sports with all the recaps and the rhythm that you get into during football season?
Yep, absolutely. You know, we'll have multiple people out and about shooting, covering games every Friday during the season, and then we'll have recaps, you know, roundups. We work in some video highlights from the live ticket side of things, so we'll be rolling some of that stuff out, and features. You know, when a kid has a big game, you know, our plan is to get some features rolling on some of these kids and highlight coaches and players and what have you. So we try to keep tabs on everybody as best we can. It's not always an easy task, but you know, we really try to do our best. And once the football season rolls around, it's fun for everybody, and it's certainly fun for everybody here at 605 Sports as well.
Awesome. Keep up the good work, Ryan.
Thank you.
So there are a lot of places you can go across the state on Friday night for the first week of the season where you're going to be entertained. And I think I'm just going to sit back and watch them all on live ticket if I can, and see what unravels in this first week. But definitely some interesting matchups, including an 11B matchup between Hot Springs, who won it all last year, and Winter, who was upset in the semis last year. And that brings us to 11B.
It does bring us to 11B, and that is a top 5 matchup to start as we get a look at our 11B initial media poll. Winner, number 1 with 10 first-place votes, Elk Point Jefferson with 4. They lost in the championship last season, won it in 2022. Sioux Valley, number 3 with 2 first-place votes, Woonsocket, Westington Springs, Sanborn Central in 4th, and Hot Springs, the defending champions, in 5th. Bridgewater, Emory, Ethan, Wagner, Dual, and Aberdeen, Ron Colley all receiving votes. Another class, Jandy, as we move up to 11-man, where when you get down to the semifinals, it really is anyone's game because all these teams have the capability to be championship-level contenders.
I could not agree with you more. I think what Hot Springs did last year proved that point. And that's a team that's been consistent now over the last couple of years, and we kind of have to add them to the mix as perennial favorites after they've done it for a couple of years. And Bridgewater, Emory, Ethan, even though they're not in the top 5, they're a team that could beat teams in this top 5. Winter obviously has such a tradition of excellence, but it's not like it used to be where they just show up and go undefeated. 11B, so many teams in this class and so many good teams at the top of this class.
Well, if you remember when we talked about Winter last season, you know, they got off to that slow start. I think their first game was an 8-0 game.
Yeah,
and then they
they
really turned it on toward the end before eventually falling in the semifinals. But this is a Winter team that at that point had won, 35, 36 games in a row, something of that nature. So you always look at them as a contender, but Elk Point Jefferson 2 years ago, Hot Springs last season, and then you look at a team like Sioux Valley that really came on strong. They got upset by Hot Springs in the quarterfinals last year, but when you look at who's coming back for Sioux Valley, they're a team that could really make a run.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Donovan Rose is the guy you look at, the future USF running back who does a little bit of everything for them, but I really like what they have on the inside with Jacob Guthmiller, Tobin Squires, Preston Top. A lot of returning starters on this team. They have a question at quarterback, but I don't think that's a huge question because I think they're going to ground and pound. They've got the athletes to do that on the inside. Maybe one of the better defenses we'll see in 11B this year in Sioux Valley. Dan Hughes always has this team ready to play, and he's always had teams that are close to being the best, has never had that team. We'll see if the star power from a Donovan Rose and from some of these other guys can maybe push them into that top 2 so they can have a chance to at least play for a championship in the Dome.
Well, you mentioned Mr. Rose. Let's get a look at some other game changers across Class 11B. And probably the big one on there is the future Nebraska Cornhusker, Sean Hammerbeck.
Sean Hammerbeck is an animal. I watched him play against West Central last year, and he was in a different league. That was one of the reasons we talked about Winter's resurgence, where they beat some of these teams like West Central on the road. He was leading a defense that was unstoppable. So he's going to come into this year. He's not going to play right out of the gates. Don't know how long he's going to be out for, but that will definitely impact this defensive line. But trust me, they've got enough guys on this D-line. I think they'll be able to absorb that more than most teams would be able to. And, of course, we know they can run the football on offense. This is a team that is built for that. But definitely Hammerbeck being the featured guy on this group. Another guy I got to point out is Holden Havlick of Wessington Springs, of Woonsocket, Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central. He has an opportunity to put up some huge numbers this year. They have a new head coach in Michael Schmitz, who used to coach at Huron, got Huron to the Dome against Pierre a few years back, and then left Huron. And he's going to help Woonsocket make a resurgence this year. He is very excited about what he can do with this offense, especially with Ryder
Machalik?
No, he told me how to say this. Mahalik.
The C is silent.
Thank you, Michael, because Michael told me how to say it, and he's took him a couple times. But Ryder Mahalik at receiver, I think the Havlick-Mahalik connection is going to be outstanding this year. And then, as you see, tons of other good players, lots of different teams represented. Gannon Knable of Wagner is another guy who might come out of nowhere. I mean, it'll seem like nowhere, but this is a guy who's been building for the last few years. And Wagner could be a team, I think, that puts their stamp on the 11B playing boards this season.
Another guy on that game changer list, not necessarily forgotten about, but one of those guys you think he's still in high school, Keaton Gale from Elk Point Jefferson.
Yeah, Keaton Gale's been such a big part. He's been to 2 Dome games now with 1 championship for Elk Point Jefferson, and this year coming back as the quarterback, he gives them a huge step up just knowing what he's doing. And we didn't talk a lot about Elk Point Jefferson, but this is a team, very young team, but if they evolve quickly, they could be a lot better than the competition. If those young guys don't step up as quickly, maybe not the championship level, but still a very good team.
Yeah, this is an Elk Point Jefferson team that the past 2 postseasons has defeated Winter. Beat them in the championship 2 years ago, beat them in the semifinals last season before losing a close game to Hot Springs 13-7. Ironically enough, the previous year's champion has lost in the championship the next year each of the last 3 seasons. So that will certainly be something to watch out for. When you look into your crystal ball, who's your 11B pick here in late August?
Well, I tipped my hand a little bit there. If the young guys from Elk Point Jefferson step up, this is a team that could take it all. I think Winter's right there with them. I think Woonsocket Wessington Springs really has a chance to make an impact here. But when I look at overall team, Elk Point Jefferson last year 10-2. They've got their quarterback back in Keaton Gale, Gunnar Ewing, Ashton Fairbanks, Grayson Gerard, Hudson Kemp, a very solid returners on offense, including Hudson Kemp, maybe one of the best linemen in the entire class. And then defensively, also looking good with 8 starters back on defense. Man, if these 2 or 3 or 4 new starters who come in who are young play up to their level, this Elk Point Jefferson team is going to be the best in 11B.
We went from Elkton Lake Benton to Elk Point Jefferson. So
so easy to do.
We got too many Elks.
Still preseason for us.
One last point. Hot Springs, the defending champions, they lose a bunch of guys. I think that's part of the reason why they're number 5 early in this preseason poll. But you had called it last year. You saw something in Hot Springs early in the season, and they really skyrocketed in the playoffs. I think when they blew out Sioux Valley in the quarterfinals, that was kind of the impetus for thinking, okay, this is a Hot Springs team that can go all the way. Now, they have that championship experience as a team. They just don't have a lot of experience from individual players coming back. I think they're probably the most intriguing team because we really don't know what we're going to get from them this season.
They're still really good on the line, and They're super well coached. Ben Kramer does an absolutely great job, and you can tell this team, when they started focusing on the line, and yeah, they got a few players like the Iverson twins and Macheski who really came in and did some big things and got the headlines, but it's because that line's been so good. So yeah, I still think they're a top 5 team, just don't have the electric players they had in the last 2 years.
All right, 11B, your official pick is Elk Point Jefferson. Moving on up to 11A, and this was the most fun media poll to look at. There is a lot of opinion on 11A. So let's get a quick look at that media poll right now initially. Canton, number 1, but barely, with 6 first-place votes. And then Sioux Falls Christian Del Rapids technically tied for second. Chargers got a couple more first-place votes than the Warriors. West Central got 2 first-place votes at number 4. Lennox at number 5. Rapid City Christian moving up from 11B. They received votes. Tri-Valley and Dakota Valley also receiving votes. But 4 of the top 5 teams in this initial poll got first-place votes.
And this was the one I was really curious to see how the voters would vote, because to me it's Lennox and Sioux Falls Christian are the teams that we're going to be talking about at the end of the year, and they didn't get quite as much love as I thought they would. But that's because a team like Canton has Kane Wallner back. They've got a really good offensive line. They've got Larson, one of the best defensive lines. So they've got a lot of talent there, too. And they've got their Thunder and Lightning, not the same guys back as last year, but they do have a very, very good speed and power in the backfield. So I get why Canton's number 1. I just think that the Sioux Falls Christian team and this Lennox team are a step above everybody else. But let's go back in the tape and check and see if that's right or not. And then Del Rapids, West Central, your traditional greats who are maybe not as good as they were last year, but you know they're going to be in the mix once again this year.
I think when you look at Canton specifically, that running game has always been consistent. And, the Thunder and Lightning of Wallner and McCracken last season really did numbers for them. Wallner's still around. I think just having that ground and pound game is essential in Class 11A. But I agree with you. When you look at Sioux Falls Christian, a team that's been to the semifinals past 2 years in a row, have yet to get to the Dome, and you look at the guys coming back, especially guys on the line and a playmaker like Cole Snyder.
Yeah, Cole Snyder, when he was healthy last year, made such a difference for them. And then Lincoln Semchenko, a D1 type lineman who anchors a huge offensive line for 11A. Paul Hookman on defense, Braden Whitty, so many good players on this team. And you put that together with a quarterback with some experience, and man, they've got the pieces. Now, we'll see if they've got the mentality to be able to really push that through, because that's one thing. Sioux Falls Christian did get a nice win in the quarterfinals last year, but ran into Del Rapids. They're going to have a little bit more this year if they want to push all the way to the Dome.
Let's go look at some of your game changers across this class. Jackson Boonstra is a kid we saw last season from Dakota Valley. He's only 5'6", but
he's fast.
He is incredibly fast. He can make a difference by himself for Dakota Valley. And then you go on down the line. We mentioned the Sioux Falls Christian guys. The team that I think is going to be most interesting is Rapid City Christian. Moving up from Class 11B, really got some excellent experience last year. Also have to shout out Matt McIntosh, who is my wife's cousin, so I have to point that out. But Rapid City Christian, all family members aside, they're going to be interesting because they proved that they have the athletes to compete.
Kiefer will do a phenomenal job throwing the football. Wes Schlebach has impressed college scouts, and they've got 4 or 5 guys who really can play. Now, can they field a whole team enough to move up from 11B to 11A and compete week after week? So 11B at the top, those teams are just as good as the teams in 11A, but I think you have a tougher schedule once you get to 11A, and you're playing, these DAC 12 teams week in, week out, and you see the early schedule for Rapid City Christian. It's going to be brutal. You got Canton, you got Del Rapids right out of the gate. So can you hang with those type of teams? We'll know after 3 or 4 weeks where Rapid City Christian's at. They could be one of those teams we're talking about right at the very top, but we'll see if they can do it on a consistent basis. Tri-Valley, another team that moved up from 11B to 11A, who was really on the move up at last year. They played a lot of close games that they didn't quite get the win. They've got a lot of good athletes, a lot of wrestlers who are translating that power onto the football field. I think Tri-Valley is another team that you really have to watch out for in 11A.
And then you look at some of the other guys. We mentioned how Del Rapids, West Central, they kind of get, the respect because they've done it so consistently over the years. You look at Cole Rusink, the Rusinks and Del Rapids. just like the Stoobies in Del Rapids. I mean, there are kids and family members that pass on down for the Quarriers, and they're always going to be competitive. It's just a question of what do they do at quarterback with Jack Henry gone, and what do they do in terms of finding more consistency from an offensive and defensive standpoint with this year's group?
And the big question is how will the change in coaching? Jordan Huska stepped down, and Derek Genslinger with his first head coaching job taking over in Del Rapids. It's always a question mark. Usually it goes fairly smoothly, but it's always a question mark. And I think when you look at those changes, it gives you another reason to believe in some of these other teams who might have a chance to overtake Del Rapids this year.
And then another team that you mentioned, Lennox, and Boston Cats are one of your game changers here. Lennox number 5 in this initial poll. They were they were sneaky for a little bit last season. Then people noticed them, and then they were kind of not necessarily middling. Middling's not the right word, but they're a team that surprised a little bit in the playoffs and then maybe a little under the radar this season.
Well, that's the kind of team they are because they are kind of a pass-first team, which is rare in high school football, but they really are. But when you have a pass-first team and you're not on, you're vulnerable to lose. And they did last year. They lost a couple games they probably shouldn't have. To Madison was one of them.
Yep.
And Lennox is just a team this year, I think, even without Porter Enan on the outside, that's the guy you point to, the all-state D1 basketball player who grabs everything. He's not there. But they've got so many good players coming up on the outside. Boston Cats are going to have plenty of weapons to go to. But for me, let's watch and see if Tate Gertis can run the ball for Lennox and make them more of a balanced attack this year. Because if they are, to me, there's no team with as much talent as Lennox and Sioux Falls Christian right now.
All right, a lot of differing opinions in 11A. Your preseason pick for 11A champion.
I mentioned the two teams I think are the best, Lennox and Sioux Falls Christian. And in the end, I'm taking the Sioux Falls Christian Chargers. This is a team that won several years ago when they were in 11B and now in 11A. They're ready to take a championship home with the type of roster that they've put together. I think injuries aside, it's going to be so tough to take a team like the Chargers out this year. I got to take them.
All right, Sioux Falls Christian, couple semifinal appearances the last 2 seasons. Your pick to get to the Dome and win it all this season. Moving up to 11AA. If 11A was where there was a bunch of differing opinions, 11AA, it's the more things change, the more things stay the same. Pierre going for a record 8th straight championship. They set the record last season with 7 straight championships, but Pierre gets every first place vote. Yankton, their opponent in the Dome last season, is 2nd. T-Area 3rd, Watertown 4th, Aberdeen Central 5th, Sturgis receiving votes. It's one of those cliches, you don't rebuild, you reload, but until someone proves otherwise, Pierre just keeps restocking athletes.
Yeah, this Pierre team, they've been a couple different teams over this 7-year period where they win championships, and some are just expected to dominate, and some you have a little question, like maybe there's a little bit of vulnerability. That's kind of where I'm at with Pierre this year. There's some vulnerability. You got a brand new quarterback, Keaton Lounsbury taking over at snaps. He was in a quarterback competition that he just won, so he wasn't the head and shoulders pick to be the quarterback here. You've got Cooper Terwilliger coming into a sophomore year, already getting SEC offers. A crazy tight end. He's going to be outstanding, but when your best player is your tight end, it's tough to win in high school with your best players at tight end. So we'll see how that evolves. But it's Steve Steele. It's the coaching staff. It's the way these guys play together. It's the way the line blocks. This is just the class of the class. And until somebody else proves that they can't do it, they're definitely the team to beat.
Let's look at some other game changers across 11AA. And there's probably a reason that Yankton's number 2 because they still got some great guys coming back. Carson Ness, Matthew Sheldon, and then Evan Sirk for the Bucks.
Yeah, that boy can run. And they've got other guys that can run in this offense. We're going to see a lot of different guys. Ness really came on strong last year. But the quarterback situation with Lucas Kampshoff last year, Rugby Reich in the year before, they had some real dynamic quarterbacks. They've got a quarterback competition brewing right now. And nobody's really gone head and shoulders. So that's going to be their issue. They've got everything else covered. Maybe the best defensive team we've seen in Yankton in a long time, and that's because of Matthew Sheldon, who you see on this list, just an absolute stud on defense. So they're going to build their team a little different than they have over the last few years, but still very solid with 3 guys on this list.
And then T-Area, a team that with Yankton has kind of been competing for runner-up to Pierre the last couple seasons. What do you see when you look at the Titans?
They don't have as big of backs, and usually they just have bruisers back there, and they win with their line offensively and defensively. They still got a really good defensive lineman here in Jacob I don't want to even say the word, but I think it's John Awago. And he's definitely a guy to be reckoned with, but not as much depth as they've had on the line in the last couple of years. But they do have their quarterback back, and Brenner Conrad comes back as a junior. So maybe they'll take a different look this year too. But he's definitely the guy who's the leader on their defense for T area. And then I also have to talk about Watertown. Last year, a lot of people pointed to Juven Hudson in his senior year, and they said, this is Watertown's year. We got our stud. Let's ride him, see how far we can go to the Dome. And they didn't quite get there. But I'm telling you, this year they've got a lot of talent back, and it starts with their big offensive line. Micah Hawk, the SDSU future wrestler and lineman at SDSU. He headquarters things on that huge offensive line. And then Spencer Winchus has been outstanding. Mitch Olson on the outside. They've got their quarterback back in Trayton Hamrick. So I think Watertown's maybe the team we're not talking about, and it's because of some of these stars you see on this list.
Yeah, you look at 11 AA, there's only 11 teams in there. Pierre has dominated for so long. And you mentioned the Arrows from Watertown getting to the semis. They were competitive with Pierre for a quarter until Pierre kind of put it on cruise control after that. But you lose a guy like Juven Hudson, but then with the playmakers that you mentioned coming back, not to repeat your point, but it seems like Watertown may be the not necessarily under the radar team, but the team that might surprise and maybe move up and be Pierre's biggest challenge.
I think Watertown definitely could do that. I think Yankton and T have proven that they kind of belong in that top three, but wait till the end of the year. I think Watertown might make their move.
All right, your 11 AA pick. Do I even need to ask or?
This year I had to decide if I got the field or Pierre, who would I take? I'd still take Pierre.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're dominant. They don't have dominant players like they've had in the past. But how can you count against them, especially when there's not another team in that top five right now that you look in and say, oh, wow, these guys really got a shot. We got good teams, but there's not like a team that really has their best foot forward. So Govs until somebody beats them.
Until they get knocked off. Yeah, I agree. I think Pierre, as you alluded to, with the athletes they have and with just the team camaraderie that Steve Steele has instituted over his time in the capital city, just they're on another level, even if maybe they're not as quote unquote dominant as years past.
Yeah, and we'll see. Maybe they'll become dominant. That's a team that even their JV and their freshman and sophomore squads, they're not always great, but by the time they're varsity players, they know their roles, and Steve Steele knows where to put them.
All right, Pierre looking to make it 8 straight 11 AA championships. And finally, we move up to South Dakota's biggest class in 11 AAA. Preseason poll, Harrisburg number 1 with 9 first-place votes. Lincoln second with 6. Brandon Valley third. O'Gorman got a first-place vote at number 4. Sioux Falls, Washington at number 5. Jefferson is receiving votes. Oddly enough, for a class that only has 9 teams, there have been 5 different champions in the last 5 years.
There have, and in the last 3 years, we've had undefeated champions. And that's one thing when I talked to all the 11 AAA coaches this year, they said, I highly doubt we'll have an undefeated AAA team this year just because there's so many good teams at the top. And the one with the X on their back, Jared Fredenburg and Lincoln, I know they only returned 2 players starting on offense, but they are still a very talented team, and I had a chance to catch up with Coach Fredenburg to talk about what he expects this year out of his Patriots.
In this team, we've kind of talked about it, and that's kind of been the question a lot with the media. It's like, okay, so what do you do when you have that, 26 seniors that move on and just, how talented they were. Well, this group really has a chip on their shoulder. It's like, hey, we were part of it too, and so that they want to prove that we can keep the standard where it is.
So Coach Fredenburg excited, cautiously excited,
Yep.
Even though he doesn't have a ton of players back. He talked about guys like Luke Kremchus and, of course, Mikey Roach on the outside and some really talented players who haven't been able to show what they can do yet because they've been practicing against some of the best players in the state over the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how Lincoln comes out. But they did not come out as the number 1 team in the poll.
No, they came out number 2, Harrisburg number 1. Let's get a look at some more of your game changers. Let's start with the guy at the top. This is probably one of the more interesting stories. Devion Bonwell-Whitty transferring from Brandon Valley to Washington. Washington with a returning quarterback in Tommy Hoffman. Ralph Williams, by the way, from Lincoln, running back, also transferred to Washington. So a couple playmakers added to the Warriors' arsenal. Washington has shown bits of flashes over the years, but this might be the year with these playmakers where they could really move up.
Well, this will give them a chance if they're down in the game to know that they're never out of the game because Tommy Hoffman really has gotten better. He's a solid college quarterback. And if he has a little more consistency, he could be one of the better quarterbacks in this class. But yeah, you have Bonwell Whitty. They're going to find every possible way to get him the ball, including down the field, including you could see him taking handoffs.
Yep.
But their receiving core is really good. The big question, can the offensive line handle the rush? Can they get yards on the ground? And that's what we're going to find out with Washington, is if they can, they're definitely a Final Four type team.
And Bonwell Whitty's former partner on the outside at Brandon Valley, Landon Delaney, the future Jackrabbit, he comes back and he can take the top off any defense.
He is so good. His hands are so good. He runs such great routes. If he can stay healthy, that's been his issue over the last couple of years. If he's on the field, he is absolutely electric and hard to stop. Now, do they have a quarterback that can get him the ball? That's their question. That's most teams' question in 11 AAA is, do you have a veteran quarterback who can get him the ball? We'll find out. Briggs Knudsen, really good, but unproven so far. But that sophomore class they had last year, now becoming juniors, they are so good, David. I really think if they evolve, they've got as much or more potential than anybody else in this class.
You mentioned Washington and seeing if they would have the ability to protect up front. That's not a question with Brandon Valley when you got Hudson Parliament up there.
Well, Hudson Parliament, we're talking about SEC offers. Another kid who's already got an SEC offer, just a junior this year. Yeah, he's definitely going to lead a group of bad boys up front for Brandon Valley, and that's not been an issue for Brandon over the last couple of years, is figuring out a way to block. And they've got guys who can run. Their defense is solid. Depth is really good. So, again, the question for them, can they get yards in the air when they need them in big games?
Then you look at playmakers. Sullivan Schlimgen, another future Jackrabbit with
so
O'Gorman. You look at this Knight squad, a team that, again, showed bits and flashes last season. They lose some key Division I guys from last season to this season. Easy for me to say, but you look at O'Gorman and you look at Schlimgen and his ability to make plays. O'Gorman could also be kind of another sneaky team.
They have the fewest seniors they've had on a team since Jason Poppinga's been there, but the seniors they have are pretty good. Sullivan Schlimgen being one of them. And then some younger players, Jace Teesey, a guy who as a sophomore last year made some huge plays before dodging injuries throughout the year, but he could be really good. Dawson Bauer, if he's back this year full strength, he's been nursing an injury this summer, but if he's back full strength, you got some tremendous playmakers for O'Gorman. Now, who's going to play quarterback? It probably will be Talon Black at this point. Some people talking about maybe Sully Schlimgen will line up at quarterback. We saw him run the Wildcat a few times last year. I think there'll be some packages for him, but they need a consistent guy taking snaps for them, not necessarily even to move the ball down the field, but just to have that presence on offense for this team to be good. Their young players have to step up if they want to be a top 4 team.
So you've mentioned all the teams with questions at quarterback. Harrisburg does not have that question with Sam Knuth, the future St. Thomas Tommy, who committed this past summer. I think his veteran presence is probably the thing that made voters pick Harrisburg number 1 initially.
Yeah, I think Sam Knuth, he was so good last year, and being the brother of a Division I quarterback, sometimes you don't get quite the attention. Well, he's going to get the attention this year because he has really become a good leader, and he has run the 40-yard dash in enormously quick times. If they ever let him run the football a little bit more often, I joke with him all the time that, Sam, you need to get out there and run more. He's like, yeah, I'll get to it. We'll get to it. I want to. But he gets held back by the coaching staff a little bit. Why not? You'd want to protect Sam Knuth. You don't want to get him hurt. But if he has the ability to, he can show off that athleticism. But Braden Feldy on the outside, they've got really good backs in Josiah Hines, who came on strong last year. The line has always been good because they have so many kids out. They always find the cream of the crop to be able to play those lines. This is a really solid – there's like hardly any weaknesses on this team, including Justin Cabrera playing cornerback, one of the best corners in the state on defense. I really like this Harrisburg Tigers team.
And then you look at a couple of the other Sioux Falls schools. I think Sioux Falls Jefferson just kind of trying to find, again, more kids, repopulate from that dominant team of a couple of years ago.
I think they're an under-the-radar team. I think this is a year, it would not shock me to see Jefferson even coming into the playoffs as maybe a 4 seed or something like that, but finding their way to the Dome. Ethan Swenson, they do have a veteran quarterback. Davion Simonson, really good. Vince Benedetto tells me their offensive line is averaging about 15 to 20 pounds heavier than they have been in the past, and that's been an issue for them line.
Yep.
They just haven't been able to get a consistent line. So if they get line play, you got Benedetto, you've got Jordan Detter on the outside, you got Ethan Swenson, who is a year under his belt as the starter now. they got a really team. And don't forget about Eddie Whiting. This guy played as a sophomore last year. And as a junior this year, he could be a breakout player as one of the best players in the state as a junior.
And of course, Sioux Falls Jefferson just in its 4th year of existence. So finally, those freshmen are seniors now as Jefferson, kind of tries to find, the base to actually, have a team. Remember, they had, like 40 kids that first year, and then they kept building them up into a champion a couple of years ago.
I have to add one more thing, Dave, on this game changers list. One guy you maybe not have heard of is Elias Gillen out of Stevens. Well, he's not only D1, he's an FBS lineman out of Stevens going to Texas Tech. He is a monster at over 300 pounds. A lot of question marks with Stevens this year, but I think they're a mid-level team if everybody really gets things going, which, they've been a bottom 2 or 3 team in the last couple of years. So for them to maybe move to the middle of the pack with some real strength on their line, I think would be a huge move for them.
And then probably the team in Sioux Falls with the biggest question marks is Roosevelt. They have a new head coach in Jason Stahlberg, Kim Nelson moving on, now an assistant at the University of Sioux Falls. They have a 3-way competition for quarterback right now between a trio of juniors. It's going to be interesting to see how the Rough Riders handle things early. It might, quote-unquote, be rough early, but I think with a coach who's had success being an assistant at Washington for so long, I think he'll get them going in the right direction.
If he stays the course, their young classes, their freshmen, and even their middle schoolers who are projected to go to Roosevelt are going to be very good. So he's just got to worry about building a culture, getting more kids out for the next couple of years. He's going to be just fine. But this year is going to be tough, no doubt about it. Talon Steve, very good player. They're going to rely on for a lot of offense and defense, but not a ton of depth here.
All right. Who is your 11 AAA pick?
I literally have been tossing and turning in bed, switching this pick because if I had more guts, I might take Jefferson, but I don't quite have enough guts. I don't have quite enough guts for that. I think Lincoln, Jefferson, Brandon Valley, and Harrisburg are the 4 teams that are really going to rise to the top. Washington and O'Gorman are right there, but I think those 4 teams I mentioned. And the team with the fewest question marks, the Harrisburg Tigers. And they've got a ton of grit. And I love Sam Knuth as a leader. I think this team is heading in the right direction. Great receiving core this year. Give me the Harrisburg Tigers to get it back done this year with the depth that they have.
All right, so to recap, your 11-man champs, 11B is Elk Point Jefferson, 11A is Sioux Falls Christian, AA is Pierre, and AAA is Harrisburg.
Sounds right. Sounds perfect. 7 for 7, Dave.
All right, exactly. Again, everyone record this, play it back when your teams are disrespected. And, it's late October, early November. Your team's in the quarters and semifinals, and this man did not pick you. You can just use this as Well, actually, it's not even bulletin board material. You can't put a video on a board.
It's social media material.
Social media material.
That's what it is.
Absolutely. Send all your DMs to Jason Andera. Anyway. Congrats. This is the first episode of Inside the 605.
It's going to be so good.
As I mentioned, we're going to be here all season long throughout the South Dakota high school football season. We will recap the previous week, look ahead to the following week, and that's going to be every Wednesday night during the season at 8 o'clock Central Time on YouTube, 605sportslive.tv. Final thoughts as we embark on this new venture?
I always love the beginning of the year. A lot of great games coming up on Friday. And then the following week when all 7 classes are in action, nothing better than that. And a ton of great games to see. And we're not going to see, we always know this, but you're not going to see the same team on Friday that we're going to see in the Dome. Give these kids a chance to grow and evolve, and there'll be a lot of teams proving us wrong.
All right. That is it for the debut episode of Inside the 605. For Jason Andera, I'm David Brown. We will see you next week.